Good morning, sunshines. Welcome to your Geography and History of the World lesson for today. It's Mrs. Doty here. I hope you all are having a fantastic either Monday or Tuesday, depending on which cohort you're in. So for your journal today, you had to talk about the differences between climate and weather. So for your journal, you should have had something about weather being what it's like now. If I look outside at my window in my classroom right now, the weather is cloudy. That, however, does not describe climate. Weather is what it's like right now. Climate are weather patterns over a period of time. So your climate generalizes what the weather is like in an area. So a foundation we need to have in GHW this year is all about climates, because as we study different regions of the world and we look at how geography impacts the way people live, I'm going to expect you to have background knowledge on those climate regions and how they impact things like jobs, population density, and farming. So you can see here, there are multiple different climate regions in the world. The first thing we need to talk about, though, is a type of classification that's used for the different climate regions. So you've got low level, mid latitude, and then high latitude climates. Your low latitude climates are climates that are in between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, 23.5 degrees north, 23.5 degrees south. This part of the world gets direct sunlight all year long. It's always tilted towards the sun, no matter where Earth is in its revolution around the sun. So these climates that you're going to find here are going to share the common characteristic of being hot. Your mid-latitude climates then are found north and south of your low latitudes. The word I would use to describe mid-latitude climates is variable. So they change, they're not always the same. For example, here in the Hoosier State, we're a mid-latitude climate, humid continental. It's hot in the summer and it's cold in the winter. It varies. So variable is how I would describe, in general, these mid-latitude climates. Then your high latitude climate regions are going to be your cold climate regions like tundra and subarctic. So as I go through each climate region, you're going to see me classify it as either low, mid, or high latitude. So again, the common characteristics of low latitudes, hot, mid latitudes are variable, and high latitude climates tend to be cold. So I would recommend, as I go through this slideshow, for you to have a piece of paper out and jot down your own notes over each climate region. Maybe writing down 1 to 2 characteristics, or not 1 to 2, I would say actually 2 to 3 characteristics of each climate region. So I would write down 2 to 3 characteristics of each climate region as I go through this. So we're going to start in the low latitudes. And in the low latitudes, you're going to find, we know, hot climates. And that is where you're going to find a tropical wet climate region. Tropical wet is most often what we associate with a tropical rainforest region, this type of vegetation. So tropical wet climates tend to average between anywhere from 50 to over 260 inches of rainfall annually. So that's a lot. Tropical wet climate is just one season, so it's always like that. It's not like here in Indiana where we have winter and spring and summer and fall. Places in the world where you would find tropical wet climates include parts of Brazil, the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa, Indonesia in Southeast Asia. So all of these places along the equator that get direct sunlight year-round and lots of rainfall are where you'll find this tropical wet climate, where the vegetation is characterized by tropical rainforest. Because of the large amount of vegetation and rainfall, this is where you are able to find an abundance of plants and also animal species that are very unique to this area. So lots of what we would refer to as biodiversity. The average temperature in a tropical wet climate is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Next up, you've got a tropical dry climate. Those are found surrounding the tropical wet climate. So they're low latitude, so like tropical wet, they tend to be hot. A difference that tropical dry is from tropical wet is that you do have two seasons. You typically have a dry season and a wet season. So still different from what we have here in Indiana, but a similarity is that it has seasons like we do, except it's a wet season and a dry season. During the dry season, the average temperature is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And during the wet season, the average temperature is about 77 degrees Fahrenheit. A common piece of vegetation that you'll find in a tropical dry climate is a savanna. So this is a savanna here. If you have ever seen the film The Lion King, it takes place in a tropical dry climate in a savanna. So you've got short grasslands with scattered trees along here. This is where you'll find lots of animals in Africa that are living in their same habitats free of human involvement. Here in the building, and it's really loud, so I apologize if you heard that. So anyways, tropical dry climate has these savannas, these scattered grasslands that you'll find especially in Africa. Our next low-level climate then is desert. So deserts are found in low-latitude climates. They can be found sometimes in mid-latitude climates as well, but typically they are mostly found in the low-latitude area. So a common misconception that people have about deserts is that you're characterized as a desert based on temperature. That's false. Desert is defined as getting 10 or less inches of precipitation annually. So if you get less than 10 inches of precipitation annually, then you're classified as a desert. So it does not have to do with scattered shrubs or a cactus. It doesn't have to do with how hot it is. It has to do with precipitation, with rainfall. So a desert is classified as getting 10 or less inches of rainfall annually. The animal life that you find here in a desert is going to be pretty scarce because it is such a harsh climate because of the lack of water found here. Something unique, though, about deserts is they actually make up about 33% of the world, with the largest desert being in North Africa. So this is the Sahara. We'll study this pretty in depth here in just a few weeks when we study North Africa and the Middle East. But the Sahara is the world's largest deserts. You've also got some deserts in the western United States. In Africa, you've got the Namib and Kalahari. You've got the Gobi Desert up here in Asia, the Outback in Australia, the Atacama Desert here in Chile and South America. Most of these deserts tend to be really hot during the day, but then really cold at night. That's a generalization. It doesn't describe all of them, but a generalization. So temperature does tend to be hot, but that is not how you're classified as a desert. It's based on precipitation. All right, our last low-level climate, our low-latitude climate that we're going to find is steppe. Steppe can be found both in the low latitudes here and also in the mid-latitude regions. A steppe climate is on the edge of your deserts, on the edge of your arid regions. They tend to be located away from any oceans or large bodies of water, so they tend to be less humid. You'll also find that they get about 10 to 30 inches of rainfall annually, so more than a desert. Warm summers and very harsh cold winters are what you would find in a steppe climate region. They do get more rain than a desert, but they do often experience droughts or long periods of time without precipitation. Next up, we are moving to the mid-latitude climates. So we were just in the low latitudes with tropical wet and dry, and we talked about how arid and semi-arid, or sometimes called desert and steppe, how they can be found in the mid-latitudes. Mid-latitudes, I said earlier in the show, are described as being variable. So their climate is not consistent or the same all year round like low latitude climates are. So our four mid-latitude climates are humid subtropical, marine west coast, humid continental, and Mediterranean. I also like to call these our farming climate regions. You'll find these here in the United States. These variable climates do allow for more vegetation than your low and high latitudes. So humid subtropical is found right here in the southeastern part of the United States. If you've ever been to Florida, Georgia, Alabama, South and North Carolina, you've visited a humid subtropical climate. So humid subtropical climates are characterized by short, mild winters, and you get rainfall typically year-round here. You have both coniferous and deciduous trees here in a humid subtropical, and on average, you get about 48 inches of rainfall per year. A large variety of animal life, including mammals, reptiles, and amphibians found in a humid subtropical climate. So again, when I think humid subtropical, I think of Florida and Georgia, those hot climates during the summer, and they still tend to be pretty warm the rest of the year. Maybe some of you guys have grandparents or neighbors that go from Indiana to Florida during the winter to escape our cold. It's because Florida is pretty nice in the winter. It is not as hot as it is during the summer, but it's pretty comfortable. Okay, next up, we've got marine west coast. So marine west coast you find in much of Europe, along coastal areas in South America, Australia, and then here in the United States and Canada. So marine west coast is found along our Pacific coast. In a marine west coast, it's oftentimes characterized by the ocean winds bringing cool summers and cool, damp winters. So you've got quite a mix of trees in this region. This is where you'll find some very large forests. You can see here pictures from the Pacific coast, the Northwest, places like Washington State are characterized by this marine west coast, lots of rainfall. I grew up watching and I still watch it because it's still on, Grey's Anatomy. It takes place in Seattle, Washington. There's lots of rainfall there and lots of forest. If you ever read the Twilight books or watched those movies, that is the marine west coast climate. Next up then, we've got humid continental. On your notes, definitely write down, this is what we live in. Indiana is humid continental. So you'll find this here in the United States from about Indiana into the southern part of Canada. You'll see it here in Eastern Europe, Russia, and parts of Eastern Asia as well. So humid continental is characterized really by 4 seasons. They tend to be located inland, so they're not impacted by ocean winds. And humid continental is really good for farming. So here in Indiana, we've got our corn and our soybeans that we're growing. We're able to do that in this climate region because it does provide about 20 to 50 inches of rainfall annually and good grasslands for farming. So humid continental, make sure you write down, this is our climate. This is what Indiana is. Our next mid-latitude climate is called Mediterranean, and it's named after the region where it is most abundantly found, which is along the Mediterranean Sea. So a Mediterranean climate tends to be characterized as mild. It's impacted by both ocean currents and water temperatures. It averages about 20 inches of rainfall annually. And you'll also find here lots of vegetation that's really good for growing fruit trees like and things like grapes, figs, olives, and citrus fruits. So again, Mediterranean climate is very much impacted by the Mediterranean Sea. Those water currents and water temperature play a huge role on the countries that have this climate region. So that is Mediterranean. So our last category of climate regions are high latitude climates. So these are our really cold climate regions because they tend to be tilted away from the sun year round. So these are always colder regions. So again, low latitudes are hot, mid latitudes are variable, high latitude climate regions are cold. So our three high latitude climate regions that we're going to talk about are subarctic, tundra, and ice caps. And again, their common characteristic tends to be their colder temperatures than the other latitude climates. So going up from our mid-latitude climates, you've got next subarctic. Subarctic does experience some summer, a mild summer, but it only lasts about a month. 10 to 20 inches of rainfall annually. And this is where you'll find evergreen forests, which are supported by which support an abundance of wildlife. You'll find both black and grizzly bears in the subarctic climate. So you've got very cold, bitter winters and mild summers that don't last very long, just about a month of summer. This is also where you'll start to find permafrost, which is permanently frozen soil, so making growing crops very difficult in these regions. So you have a lower population density or number of people per square mile in this area because farming just isn't easily accessible here. Moving up then from subarctic, our next climate region is tundra. Tundra is oftentimes referred to as a transition climate because it's that transition between subarctic and then your ice caps. Very, very short summers here. And when I say summer, I mean the temperature might be about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So not what we would consider summer here in Indiana. There is a layer of permafrost here, so permanently frozen soil that stays frozen throughout the entire year, even through summer. Rainfall is variable between 10 and 35 inches annually. And you don't tend to really see trees in the tundra because their deep roots just cannot take hold within this soil because so much of it is permafrost. You will find this plant here, I believe I'm pronouncing it right, called a lichen. You'll see it on the chart you're going to be looking at in a little bit. So that is able to grow here, one of the only type of vegetation. Okay, so our last high latitude climate are ice caps. So ice caps are found at the poles. And, this is what I think of when I think of Antarctica. The interesting thing about ice cap climates is half the year it's continuous sunlight, and the other half of the year it's almost continuous darkness. And that's because they're at the poles. So either half the year they're tilted completely towards the sun, the other half of the year they're tilted away from the sun. The warmest month here, the average temperature is still below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. So very, very cold here. You can see there's no real vegetation. So you do have lots of animal life like seals, polar bears, and penguins found here. Okay, so we have one climate region left called Highland. And Highland is our mountainous climate region. It can be found in the low, mid, or high latitudes because it's based on elevation. So Highland climate can be found at any latitude region, whether it's low, mid, or high, because it's based on your latitude, it's based on your altitude, not your latitude. I misspoke that first time. So again, it's based on your altitude, not your latitude. So temperature depends on elevation. The higher you go, the colder it gets. So a highland climate is your mountain climate region. All right, so what you're going to be doing next then, now that we've gone through this and you hopefully took some good notes, 2 to 3 bullet points of information per climate region, what you're going to be doing next then is filling out a chart. This chart is on Canvas under today's date, and when you make your copy of it, you're going to see that the chart looks like this. So for this chart, what you're going to do is determine what are positives and what are negatives of each climate region. I would like you to try to come up with at least 2 positives and 2 negatives of each climate region. So I'm going to put that on here as a visual so you can see that right now. When you are doing this chart yourself, I would like you to try and come up with 2 positives and 2 negatives. So think back on the presentation I just gave. On this chart, you're going to see some general characteristics of each climate that I went over. And you're going to want to have 2 bullet points of 2 positives and 2 negatives. So let's do one together. For a positive of tropical wet, I would put that a positive is tremendous amount of wildlife. And I'm also going to put tropical rainforest. To me, those are both major positives. You've got a large amount of wildlife and plant life, and then tropical rainforest climates are found there, which can provide resources. So these are both really beneficial. Some negatives, though, of your tropical wet climate. I would say a negative could be constant rainfall. I'm not someone who enjoys constant rainfall, so I can see that as a negative, and another negative consequence would be flooding. You may use these as your examples. So I am totally fine with you plugging those 2 into your chart, your 2 positives and your 2 negatives here, because if we were doing this in class, which on a normal year we would be, I would expect you to write these down because we would have done these together. So you need to go through then and do the rest of these yourself. Look at the characteristics, go back in my presentation and listen to what I talked about, but you need 2 positives and 2 negatives for each. After you fill that out, then you need to complete the exit ticket, which you will write down here in this space. So you'll type it down here. I just typed a bunch of nonsense letters. That's where you'll type your answer. I would appreciate when you type your actual answer, though, for this. If you want to change the font size and color, that is sometimes beneficial for me as I'm grading it. So you're going to choose one of the climate regions and imagine that you're traveling there for a month. I want you to describe 3 items you would need to pack for that trip based on the uniqueness of that climate region. For example, if I was going to travel to the ice caps, so to go to the poles, one of the things I would definitely pack would be an abundance of food, because you're not going to be able to grow any food there because farming doesn't happen there. I'm also going to need winter boots and a winter coat because it's so cold. So describe 3 items. You can't use the ones I just gave, so you need to describe 3 items, and then tell me how this climate region compares and contrasts to our climate, which is humid continental. So compare and contrast, give a similarity and a difference of whatever climate region you choose to that of Indiana. So that is your task to do. You will submit this to Canvas. So please do get this done today. If you have any questions throughout the day, email me. I am teaching the other cohort today, but I will get back to you just as soon as I can. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you tomorrow.